Okay, we're up to Pei Aleph Amid Aleph at the top line, a new Mishnah, so everyone can join in without previous information required. Kasav L'Garis says each day, a person goes ahead and he writes a get to go ahead and divorce his wife. Kasav L'Garis says each day, he writes a get to divorce his wife, the Nimlach, and then he changes his mind. In other words, he never gave her a get. Beis Shammai Oimrim Pasla Min HaKahuna. Beis Shammai says she's puzzled from the kahuna. She cannot go ahead and marry a kohen. Why? Ostensibly because she's a gerusha. But the question is, she's not a gerusha because he never gave her a get. Beis Hillel Oimrim, and Beis Hillel is of the opinion, Beis Hillel Oimrim, and Beis Hillel is of the opinion that Afal Pisha Nasnula al Tanai, even if a person would give his wife a get on the Tanai, the loy nasa Tanai, and Tanai was not fulfilled, loy pasla min kahuna. It doesn't passel her from the kahuna. So let's see. Let's figure out what's going over here. Pei Aleph Amid Aleph Mech. Pei Aleph Amid Aleph. The guy wants to divorce his wife. He never ever gives her a get. Says Beis Shammai, she's puzzled from the kahuna. I mean, it's a one. How in the world is she puzzled from the kahuna if she's not a gerusha, fellas? In order to be a gerusha, we know by now you need v'nasa b'yoda to give it in her hands. He never gave it to her. He never gave it a get. So how could she possibly be considered puzzled from the kahuna? How's that possible? Beis Hillel says even if you would give her the get, and the get was on a condition, if the condition wasn't fulfilled, then she is not divorced, even though despite the fact she had a get. In other words, the Mishnah is going from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. Like Beis Shammai, she's divorced even if you give the get. Like Beis Hillel, even if you give the get, she's not divorced. The question is, we understand Beis Hillel much better than Beis Shammai. Okay, so it's time for a bit of a charifis, meaning a very sharp, brilliant answer. Let's look to the end of the Masechta. Let's look ahead. The Daf Tzadik. The pasuk says, "Ki yikachish isha." If a man takes a wife, uba'ala, and he lives with her, v'hayim loy simsachem be'einav, and she doesn't find favor in his eyes, he matzah ba'er vasdava, because he found a matter of immorality. Because of a sefer krisis. Now, when the Torah says that he finds a bit of immorality, is that the only reason one can divorce their wife or not? Is that the only reason? So let's see the Mishnah on Daf Tzadik, guys. The Mishnah on Daf Tzadik. What does the Mishnah say? Beis Shammai Oimrim. Beis Shammai says, Lo yigarish adam es ishtoi. A person should not divorce his wife. Elim kain matzah ba'er vasdavar, unless he found a matter of immorality. Shneimar. He matzah ervas davar. Beis Hillel Oimrim, and Beis Hillel is of the opinion, afilu ikdicha tafshila, even if she burnt his food, shenemar ki matzah ervas davar. Rabbi Kiva Oimrim, afilu matzah acheres no'imen, or even find a better looking woman, shenemar v'yilnat simsachem be'einav. So clearly, Beis Shammai says the reason why a person is going to divorce his wife because he found a matter of immorality. Guys, right? Let's go back to our Mishnah now on Daf Pei Aleph. Listen to a Chassam Seifa, fellas. Listen to a Chassam Seifa. Kasav L'Garis Ishtai says the get. If he wrote a get to go ahead and divorce his wife, the nimlach, and he changes his mind. Beis Shammai is of the opinion pasla min kahuna. Question: he never gave it a get. How could she be pasla from the kahuna? So the logical way of thinking, how is she a gerusha? Says Chassam Seifa, she's not a gerusha. Who said this? Beis Shammai. Like Beis Shammai, what's the only reason you could divorce your wife? He matzah ba'er vazoina. She's puzzled, you know why? Because she had relations with another man that would puzzle her. It's a psul of znus. We spoke about many times. A zoina does not mean a prostitute. That's a kadesha. A zoina means someone who is mizana with someone that's asa to her. So Mimela, since Beis Shammai is of the opinion, he matzah ba'er evastav is literal. So why is this guy writing a get? He's writing a get because he found a matter of immorality in his wife. Thus, she's passed from the kahuna, not because of Gerusha, she's passed from the kahuna because what? He matzah ba'ervas davav, because he found a matter of immorality, a piece of blitz genius from the Chassam Seifa, right? Nothing to do with Gerusha, you never gave her a get. It's because she's a Zaina, and a Zaina is passed the kahuna. You can write it down in the Sari Gemara, a piece of brilliance from the Chassam Seifa. Says the Gemara. Shalach la Rabbi Yosef b'rei de Rav Menashe midvil l'Shmuel. Yilmidenu Rabbeinu. Yatzel coil. Let's say a coil goes out. A coil means there's a rumor. Yatzel of coil ish ploni kayin kosav get leishtai. Ish ploni kayin. He wrote a get to his wife. Ish ploni kayin. That's the rumor that he divorced his wife. Via shevish tachtav misham shasai. So the rumor is he divorced her. They're still living together, and she's taking care of him. Mahu, what's the din? So Shalach le Shmuel sent back to Rabbi Yosef. Teitzei v'hadavet tzarich bedika. Now it's very interesting. Usually teitzei means you get divorced, she leaves, and you check into the matter. Look at Rashi, fellas. It says Rashi teitzei mifnei akoil. She can't live with him because of the rumor of a divorce. Aval hadavet tzarich bedika koidim shenoitziena mimenu. But the matter needs a bedika before she leaves. So according to Rashi, the order is a bit reversed. It's David Tzarech Bedika. In other words, we have to be chayish for the rumor, but she doesn't leave until we go ahead and ascertain that the rumor is true. The order is a little bit different. The Bach says that, in fact, Pshat is the opposite. Teitzei Shitaka goes out, and then you need a Bedika to see, but first, or else the order makes no sense. That's the Rambam Shita. Anyway, according to Rashi, so we do we check into the coil. Now, what does it mean? You check into the imivat and kala if we're going to disregard the coil. Nardoi is the place of Shmuel. And Nardoi, they would go ahead and substantiate the rumor in order not to go ahead and incentivize people to do Averis. So what's the shaila over here? Why tzarech bedika? Ella, what's the problem? The Ikaril in Nesina Ksiva. That if it's a place where they called Nesina Ksiva. So the rumor is that a guy wrote a get to his wife. Now, writing a get to your wife doesn't make you divorced. Giving the get to your wife makes you divorced. So maybe it's a place where they go ahead and they called writing giving. So we have to check that out. Says the Gemara, even if you're going to tell me in the place, they go ahead and use the word Nesina, Ksiva for Nesina, they still use Ksiva for Ksiva also. In other words, it means first base. If it means second base, it also means first base. So why would that be a reason to go ahead and say? So it says Gemara, Mila Karile Ksiva, in the Megalia Milsa, the Karile Nesina Ksiva, Dilma Nasna Kamre, right? So in other words, we check into right. You check into that in fact, since it's a place that they call Ksiva Nesina, check in and see if fact the rumor is true that in this case, even though they heard Kisvu, maybe it meant no. You should go ahead and give the get. So that's what the Gemara is saying. Teitzei, it says Teitzei that the Bezdin takes the ball away because of this coil. The Omar Rav Ashi kol koilo de basin nesuin leichashin alei. If a coil goes out on a woman after she's married, we're not chayish for the coil. And Rashi explains. Let's see Rashi. Kol koilo de basin nesuin. Afa pisha shanina b'mahamagarish. Even though we're going to learn later on the chashin and lekala that nan yotza shma be'ir mikudeshes. If the coil goes out that she is married, leploni mikudeshes, v'surli nasi la'acher, she's asked to marry somebody else. So the coal goes out, she accepted Kedushin from Ruvain. And now she can't marry Shimon. At Sheetin lo oisid plenty get until Ruvain divorces. Hani mili kishiyotza kol koidim shetinasa la'acher. If the rumor went out before she married Shimon, abel yotza la'acher ben esuin le'chashinin le. So if the coal, what are you saying over here? Tate say the Havmin is the following. She's married to Ruvain, and he was a kohen. The coal goes out that maybe Ksiva means Nesina, and therefore she has to go ahead and leave Ruvain. Further Gemara Kasha, we're going to see later on in the sugya of koil that if a woman has a koil that she's married to Ruvain, she can't leave Ruvain without a get. What happens if she accepts Kedushin from Shimon? right? Right as she accepts kedushin from Shimon, then we're not chayish for the koil. So Fred the Gemara Kasha, the case that we have is the same as that case in later on in Hamagarish. You're chayish for the koil before she accepts kedushin from Shimon. Once she accepts kedushin from Shimon, we're not chayish for the koil. Over here, by our case, she's married to Ruvain. She's in the status of Ashes Ish. So why you Teitze? It doesn't make any sense. Even if you're chayish for a koil, it's only before she marries. But after she's married, we're not chayish. Over here, she's in a state of marriage. So why are you chayish? As I afraid the Gemara. Okay, says the Gemara. My Teitze. You know what Teitze means? Teitze misheni. When Shmuel says Teitze, you go out. Right? It doesn't mean she goes out from Ruvain. It means if she Ruvain Kayin, it means if she marries somebody else, she has to what? She has to go ahead and leave the second husband, right? Because the first is only a kol, and the kol came before the nesuin to the second husband. And if that's the case, you're going to say that the children from the first marriage, right? They're going to say 1 second that Shimon married her, right? Again, Shimon's also a Kayin. Guys, Shimon's also a Kayin. So if Shimon's a Kayin, they're going to say that his children from the first marriage are Chalolim, right? Says the Gemara, even the Mishani who the Mafkin, since we're making leave the first one, the second one, but not from the first one, we're going to say that the children born were good, and when there was a Gerusha, only Samech Lemisa. That was Samech Lemisa. Some Rabbi Chanam Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. Look at the difference of generations. Doris Harishonim, we find that Beis Shammai that he was machmed so that what to aser a kohen once they said that a guy wrote a get to divorce his wife and never gave it, and we chayish as we spoke after his nus. Doris Achronim Rabbi Doisa the Tanya Shivuya a woman who's a kohenes. Right, and she's eating truma. She eats truma, even though she's captured. Now, if she was captured and she was defiled, then she would not be able to eat. Right. Nonetheless, what do we say? Rabbi Doisa says she eats. Rabbi Doisa, why did this Arab who captured her do? He pressed up against her chest. Pasam in a kahuna. We should go ahead. What? Pasa from the kuna. So we see Rabbi Doisa Achronim. Right, he was more makel than the earlier generations. In the earlier generations, they were so machmer to pass from the kahuna just based upon the fact that what he wrote a get. In the latter generations, even they're captured with this more of a svar to say she's defiled. We don't say that, and she's still mutter to eat truma. Look at the difference between the earlier generations and the latter generations. Another difference, comparison between earlier generations and latter generations. They would bring Paris in from the field, derech traxman. Now there's a halacha like this, fellas. When a person is working in the field, he can eat derech haroy. He can eat not a set meal, but a regular meal. Once you heap it up, then you cannot eat a derech haroy, a derech haroy even. You have to stop. When you go in the house, right? When you go in the house, you would go in the front door, roy pnei abayis, and then. But if you didn't go roy pnei abayis, if you didn't go in the front door, you went in a derech harama, then l'chayra you would still be able to. L'chayra, Taisus asked l'chayra. It's only derech kev. What's Taisus asked? Hanu dafka chilas aroya, l'chilas kev asur kedamen. In other words, you would still be able to eat it derech haroy when you come into the house. So even though it was gemamaisa, I mixed up two things. I think you can eat derech haroy as long as it's not roy pnei abayis. But so over here, originally when they would go in the front door, which roy pnei abayis, and therefore be chayiv and shuma. And doris achroinim machnisim peres sehem, they would go ahead and derech gagos, they'd come in from the gag, derech kafifoy, so they come in from the backyard. In order to part from Maisa, that you should be able to continue to eat derech haroy. Then Rabbi Yanai einat hevel mischayev b'maisa at shiyir pnei abayis. Tevel's not mechayev b'maisa until it's roy pnei abayis. The Tosfos says that it was us the Rabbanim beforehand. Okay. Anyway, the bottom line is, what's the difference between earlier generations and latter generations? early generations, they didn't try some type of trickery to avoid being chayiv ma'isa, and in the latter generations, they would do all they can to avoid the problem. In Parshas Kisava, you have the vidui ma'isa. You say, I removed all the kodesh from min abayis. So you see, as min abayis, even the chatzar getting in the chatzar b'kavei la'maisa. As soon as the payers come in the chatzar, shnemar va'achlu b'shorecha v'saveyu yishirim in your gates v'saveyu. Your gates is mashma even through your gates in the chatzar before it gets to the house. The bottom line is two differences between earlier generations and latter. In the earlier generations, they were more machmir inyane kedusha. As we see, the kohen based upon a chashad would be asa to his wife would be asa to him. Latter generations, even captive, not. Earlier generations, they would be makbid to be chayiv ma'isa. Latter generations, they would go ahead and use trickery to go ahead and try to avoid it. Says the Mishnah, Hamigarish es ishtoi, right? And then lona imay b'pundaki. He divorces his wife, and then they spend time together in the inn. Now the question is, did he live with her again and need a new kiddushin or not? You don't need a second get, because we're going to say even if he did live with her, it was bilas nus. But you need a get from the second husband. Why? Because and if you live with her, it was shame kiddushin. So it seems to be there's no shaila if they went in together that they worked together, right? There seems to be no shaila based upon the Mishnah that if they went in together, then they had lived together. Amasai says, right? Amasai, Bismanchin is Garshim and Asuin. When is this? When the Gerushin took place after they had been married. Again, we know there's two parts to marriage, Erishin and Asuin. Umayda, Bishneskashim and Erisin, that if the get took place and they never lived together as man and wife, they were just married, but they didn't live together as man and wife. Beis Hillel will be Maida, Shein Tzrichim and get Sheni, Veish'enli Begaspai, because he's not accustomed to be with her. In other words, there was a commonality and a comfort between man and wife after they were married, and if they lived together, they had relations together. So therefore, then it says Beis Hillel Chayish, they had relations, and it was Shem Kiddushin. Mashen came where they never lived together as man and wife. It was speaking where gave her Kiddushin, but there wasn't right. There was on Erisin the first 12 months before they lived together before Nesuin. In that case, Beis Hillel we Maida, since they never had been with each other, we're not Chayish that they were in, they would be with each other. So let's try now to go ahead and figure out the case in the Mishnah. Is the Mishnah talking about any case, whether you know there was relations, you don't know there was relations, the Gemara will qualify. Amar Rab Chana Rab Yochanan, the Machlokes in Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, that Beis Shammai says you don't need to get, and Beis Hillel says you need to get. Sheru Shenevala. In fact, people saw that they did have relations. The Beis Shammai is of the opinion that ain't other mice bilas nus. So therefore, the bia was not l'shem kedushin. If it wasn't l'shem kedushin, you do not need a second get. But so savi ain't other mice bilas nus, right? But a person that doesn't make us be a bias nus. Therefore, you needed to get sheni, because since people saw that they were together, obviously they were together l'shem kedushin. If you didn't see that they were together, you don't need to get sheni. Okay, so now Rabbi Yochanan has just qualified the Mishnah that this whole machlokes is where, in fact, where you had aid them to an act of relations, right? Then there's machlokes, and that's contingent upon, as I explained in the Mishnah, whether the person will make his bia bilis nus or not. Like Beis Shammai, he would, and therefore you don't need a second get. Like Beis Hillel, they were together clearly the shem kedushin, because in other mice to be less bilis nus, and therefore you would need a get for the second bia because he was mekadesha. Continues the Gemara, but if you did not see them together, in the fact that they were in an inn alone is not enough of a reason to require a get, says Beis Hillel. What happened, in fact, was that you saw them together. If you didn't see them together, even Beis Hillel would be moida that you don't need a get. Now, what's Shein Liboy Gaspa? Fred the Gemara Kasha. Guys, when it says Liboy Gaspa, what's the difference between Erisin and Nesuin? Obviously, a comfort zone regarding having relations, correct? So now, the Ibisharu Shenivala, Mali Mena Erisin, Mali Mena Nesuin. Guys, look at me. Let's eye contact. The Mishnah says that the Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai are arguing, but people who spend time in the inn together. The whole machlokes takes place when? Machlokes takes place when the get was given from the suin. But if the get was given from Erisin, then there's nothing to worry about. Clearly, there was no relations. Why wasn't there relations? Because she was in Arusa and they weren't comfortable together, right? Says Rabbi Yochanan in the Mishnah. What's our Mishnah talking about? The Hom Achloikis, where you saw they had relations. If you saw they had the relations, so how the end of the Mishnah makes no sense, right? Only from the Su and not from Erisin. If they had relations, throw Erisin out the window. It doesn't make a difference. Bishlema, if you did not see them have relations, it makes sense to make a machlokes between the Su and an Erisin. Masha'enkin, if they're speaking where they did have relations, there's no difference, correct? Kabbalah Kasha. One more time. You, Rabbi Yochanan, we're asking Rabbi Yochanan. You, Rabbi Yochanan, qualify the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel when you saw that there was relations. Fred the Gemara from the end of the Mishnah makes no sense. Okay. Why not? Tanan. Moedim, 4 lines down. When there was a get took place from Erisin, Sheni tzrichim and a get Sheni. You don't need to get Sheni. Sheni li by gaspa, because he's not accustomed to being with her. He's not comfortable with her. The ibisharu shenivala. If it is, as you said, signed the Mishnah, speaking where they saw there was a bia, Mali mina Erisin, Mali mina Nesuin, what's the difference? Ella must be to me Shaloiro Shnivala, right? It must be you didn't see. And still they argue, and still Beis Shammai says you need to get. Rabbi Yochanan the Amar Ki Aitana. Rabbi Yochanan said it's speaking where you did see is going according to the following Tana. The Tanya, Amar B'Shem Ben Elazar, like Nechlu B'Shayim Beis Hillel al Shlei Rush Shnivala, Sheni Tzrichim and get Sheni. Al Manechlu al Sharush Shnival B'Shamiyam Adam Ma'aseh Bilas Bilas Nus. Beis Hillel Ein Adam Ma'aseh Bilas Bilas Nus. Oh, so very geschmack. So now, Rabbi Yochanan, who said this pshat, is going according to another Tana, but it's not our Mishnah, guys. Right, guys? It can't be our Mishnah because our Mishnah is making a distinction between the Suin and the Erisin. So it can't be speaking there was a bia. So when the Rabbi Yochanan say that the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel was a bia, that's according to another Tana. So Rabbi Yochanan is not the Tana of our Mishnah. Guys, good? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, I'm going to say it outside. Let's say it outside by heart. Our Mishnah we had a machlokes. Beis Shammai says you don't need a second get. Beis Hillel says you need a second get. End of the Mishnah says that's only from if the gerushin was from the Suin where they had lived together as man and wife. But if the gerushin was from Erisin, then you don't. It must mean therefore that the Mishnah is speaking where there was no edim on relations. Because if there was edim on relations, there's no difference between the Suin and Erisin. The whole difference in the Suin and Erisin is a comfortability zone with your wife. So when the Mishnah makes that distinction, it must be the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is speaking where you did not see a bia. Even there, Beis Hillel is machmir. Even when you didn't see a bia. Rabbi Yochanan says machlokes by a bia. Rabbi Yochanan has another Tana that he goes according to, and Rabbi Yochanan is not the Tana of our Mishnah. He does not agree with the Tana of our Mishnah. Very geschmack. Now, says the Gemara, Umasnisa and Kimna b'deloi re'ua shnevala b'maikamivkli, and the Mishnah is speaking where you didn't see what's the machlokes, fellas. In other words, loy Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, if you didn't see a bia, why is Beis Hillel chayish for a get? Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, I understand. But like, if you didn't see a bia just because you stayed in the same hotel together, you need a get. Why would that be? Gemara has to qualify. It says the Gemara the following: what's the machlokes? Teika edei ichud, v'leka edei bia. You have edim that they were in the room together, but you don't have edim on the bia. We don't say just because they don't say that edis is enough, and therefore we don't need to get. So just like I have edim on the yichud, I have edim on the bia. But that would only be if they were divorced from Erisin, Nesuin. Even if they're together in a room and it's only Erisin, since Ein Libay Gaspa, we're not chayish. Hillel will be Maida, you don't need to get. We don't say that. Okay? So in other words, we had two ways to explain the Mishnah. Fellas outside, look at me. If you say the Mishnah is speaking where there was Eidei Bia, so what's the machlokes? Beis Shammai says that the Bia that he made was a Bilas Nus, and therefore there's no Kedushin, a second Kedushin. Beis Hillel says, Beis Shammai says that Bia was Bilas Nus. Beis Hillel says a person doesn't make his bia bilasnus. He does not do that. Okay. If there's no edim at all, everyone agrees you don't need to get. If there's edim on the yichud, that's the machlokes. So I don't have edim on the bia, I have edim on the yichud. Question: is that edim on the yichud that they were behind closed doors equate with ede bia? Says Beis Shammai it doesn't. Says Beis Hillel it does. Says Beis Hillel, when does it equate? Provided the gerushin was from the suin. But if the gerushin was from Eristin, we do not say equate ede yichud with ede bia. That's the hezbollah. Good. Now Geshmak. Now, clearly, who is not the Amira that does not agree with the Mishnah? It's Rabbi Yochanan. So here we have a problem, guys. Listen to the problem. When Rabbi codified the Gemara, the Mishnayos, when he wanted to say that Allah is like a person, he would keep the Mishnah anonymous. That's called a Stam Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan always says the halacha is like a Stam Mishnah. The way we're learning Pshat, it's not true. The way we're learning Pshat in our Mishnah is not the way Rabbi Yochanan learned Pshat in the Mishnah. Like Rabbi Yochanan, you need Edim on the Bia, right? If you don't have Edim on the Bia, then you're not divorced. Like Mishnah, even if you don't have Edim on the Bia, you need a second get. It says the Gemara. Umi on Rabbi Yochanan hachi, v'amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kistam Mishnah. So how can Rabbi Yochanan say that it's speaking where they saw Edim? The way we learn Pshat in the Mishnah, we see Bia, we didn't see Bia. I says, it's a machlokes amaroyim whether Rabbi Yochanan said that Stam Mishnah, the halacha Stam Mishnah, right? The Mandi obviously the one that says Rabbi Yochanan, it's a problem, holds the Stam Mishnah like Rabbi Yochanan. One that says it's not a problem because why? We don't say the halacha like Stam Mishnah, therefore we speaking where what? In fact, the whole machlokes is where you saw a bia. Says the Mishnah Vaita. Okay, outside. We're worried about Kahanim. Kahanim, if they're hot-tempered and in a fit of anger, they give their wife a get, and then they say, oh man, did I make a mistake? That's a fatal mistake. They can never get married. They're finished. So what they do for the Kahanim, they made the Kahanim give a certain get. It was called a get mekusha. It was called a get mekusha. They would take the get, you write one line, you'd fold it, and you'd have Eidim. You write 2 lines, 3 lines, you'd fold it, you have Eidim. In other words, you'd have an Eid sign on every fold. And thus every fold, and you would sew every fold, it would take a year and a yovel to write such a get. So therefore, by that time, the kohen has time to calm down and realize that what he's about to do. So a special get for Kahanim called a get mekusha. That get, when it's missing a signature on one of the folds, is called a get kireach. It's called a bald get for obvious reasons, because it's missing that line. This Mishnah is discussing the halacha of a get kireach. Okay, if you use a get kireach, if you use such a get, says the Mishnah, kansa beget kireach. If a kohen divorces his wife and she remarries using what? A get kireach. Teitzi mizeh u'mizeh. V'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba. So therefore, the get is not a good get. If she married a second husband, she's still married to the first. All the children from the second husband are mamzerim. If she and the first husband mamzerim the rabbanon, she won't get a get. She won't get ksuba. She won't get perish. She won't get mezaynish. All the terrible things that she got. We said that she got messed up as a result would apply to this case, and that's the reason why it's brought in over here. Okay, so now. Constantly get kireach, tetzim mizeh. She shouldn't have used it again. Get kireach is not good because you're missing an 8 on the spot. Get kireach, hakol mashlim malav. A get kireach, anyone can sign on it. Anyone. Divrei benanis. In other words, a person who's pasal edis would be able to sign on that place where it's missing ksav. In other words, if a murderer would come over, or a karev, or a relative, or a goslin, and sign on that place, it will be okay. It's not okay if it's missing something, but for get purposes, for kireach purposes, it will be enough to sign even a person that's not an acceptable aid on that missing spot. Rabbi Kiva Omer, ein mashlimim alav ela kroivim. No, a murderer you would not be acceptable, an eved wouldn't be acceptable, a goslin would be acceptable, but a karev would be acceptable. The Gemara is going to have to make the distinction by Rabbi Akiva. What's the distinction? In all cases, they're pasal edis. Why are you accepting the karev and not accepting the goslin and not accepting the eved? Ela kroiv maruy lehei b'makam acher, who right to testify in another venue. Basically, get kireach kol shek sharav. Anytime it folds, It's literally it's knots because you would go ahead and sew by the knot. Merubim me idyav. They're more than what? Than the edim. Anytime the knots are more than the edim, that is get kireach. So if you have 5, 4, 7, 6, it's all not good. Okay, you guys, good. My time to get kireach. What's the reason? What's wrong? Gezeira mishul kulchem. It's a gezeira because of kulchem. We learned earlier in the Masechta, if a guy would say to said people, I want all of you kulchem to write a get and sign on the get. So one person writes and they all sign. So over here, how many people are signing? Ostensibly much more than 2 edim, right? More than 2 edim. So therefore, I would think that if you have 5 people signing and only five folds and 4 people, you're missing 6 folds and 5. You're missing. So therefore, it's a gezerah to kulchem, and therefore it will be puzzle. Get kireach says get kireach hakol mashlim in love. Any person can go ahead and sign to make it up. Rabbi Kiva said, oh no. Rabbi Kiva said only a korev that's kosher makam acher. So again, let's go through 3 venues, guys. Eved, Gazlin. These are the ones the Gemara uses. Eved, Gazlin, and relative. Says Benanis, they're all acceptable. Says Rabbi Kiva, the only one that's acceptable is the relative. But Eved and a Gazlin would not be acceptable. Says Rabbi Kiva, Eved my time aloi. What's the reason he's not acceptable? The Asalimemer Koshal Eidis. You might think he's Koshal Eidis. You might make a mistake thinking Eved's Koshal Eidis. Look, he's signing. Karav Nami Asalimemer Koshal Eidis. If that's the case, why would Rabbi Akiva accept a relative? He agrees by a relative. But then, if a person sees this happening, just so he'll say an Eved's Koshal Eidis, they'll say a relative's Koshal Eidis. I mean, no, they're not. Ela Eved Hainu Taima, the Dilma Asil Asuk Ele Yuchsen. You see him signing, you're going to say that he's a fine fellow. They'll say that he's not an Eved. That's what Gazlan the Bar Yuchsin who is kasher, a Gazlan who is a Jew, and we don't have to worry about him. Milo should be kosher. Allah Tanan regarding that, a Gazlan of Kiva Eimer, Emashlim and Love El Kroiva Ruin Lahei B'Makam Acher, Karavin Gazlan Loi. So it can't be that you're worried about elevating the Eved to the status of a full-fledged Jew because he signed, because a Gazlan can't sign like Rabbi Akiva, and a Gazlan, we're not worried about him elevated because he is a full-fledged Jew. So that can't be the reason. You'll say that the Eved was freed when he wasn't. Gazlan Nami Aslamema Tshuva. He did Tshuva, and then before he's acceptable as an aid. In other words, if we're going to accept this Eved, says Rabbi Akiva, let's be chayash, he was freed. If we're going to accept this Gazlan, let's say he did Tshuva, and we'll go ahead and accept this Eidus in another place. And in fact, there's still Pasal Eidus. And therefore, says Rabbi Akiva, they're not acceptable. Says the Gemara, Karev my ikla meimar. What are you going to say by Karev? Karev kuliyama yada the Karevu. What are you going to say, fellas? You're going to say, if we accept this Karev on the get kireach, we'll accept the Karev in another place. It's not true. We know he's a Karev. Guys, an Eved is a change in status. A Gazlan is a change in status. A Karev, there's no change in status, so there's nothing to worry about. It's a beautiful lumdis, right? In other words, by Eved, I'm worried about free. By Gazlan, I'm worried about doing tshuva. By Karev, what are you going to say? That he's a Karev? You're right, he's a Karev. And everyone knows a Karev cannot be an aid. So therefore, Rabbi Kiva, Benanis said they're all acceptable. Rabbi Kiva said, forget Kireach, only the Karev, but not the Eved, and I'm worried that you might accept him b'makam acher thinking he's free, not the Gazlan, you might accept him as an aid b'makam acher thinking he did tshuva. Amrav Zera, Amarav Bar Shilte, Amrav Amnuna Saba, Amrav Adam Arava, get Kireach Koshrov Shiva, the aid of Shisha. A get Kireach is 7-6, Shisha ve'ed of Chamishav, Chamisha ve'ed of Arba, 5-4 is 6-5 and 5-4. Arba ve'ed of Shleisha, 4-3. Ad kamachloikes benanas Rabbi Akiva. Al v'kishar of Shleisha ve'ed of Shnayim, where it's 3-2. And then starting up from seven folds and 6 edim, and working ourselves down. So the last time they argued was by 4-3. 4 folds and 3 edim. 3 folds and 2 edim. Dirvi akol ein mashlimin alav elakarev. So even Benanis, who accepted an Eved and a Gazlan, that's only up until 3. Once you get to 3 folds, then you have to go Edward and get a Karev, not an Eved or a Gazlan. Omer Avzer l'Rabba bar Shilta Michti Kol Shloisha b'Mekusha Kishnayim b'Pashatami. Right, 3 by get Mekusha. It seems, guys, that get Mekusha is a minimum of 3 folds, right? So we'll equate a 3 to a 2. A regular 2, can you have a karev? No way, Jose. So why by 3 would a karev be acceptable? Ma hasam by 2, karev loy. Avhacha by 3, which is the standard get kireach, nami karev loy. So Amalei, aflididi kashali, right? B'shilti, I used to add this question: why is the karev acceptable for number 3? B'shilti Rav Hamnuna lavada rava v'Amalei hanech l'shloisha b'mekusha delav deraisa. Since it's not deraisa, we'll accept the karev. Since it's not deraisa, we'll accept the karev. Tanya nami hachi get kireach k'sharav shiva v'edav shisha shita v'edav chamisha chamisha v'edav arba v'edav shloisha ad kamachlokas benanis up till 3. Kiva, Hishlam will love Eved. If you put an Eved on the 3rd spot, Benanas Lema have Vlad Kasha, Kiva have Vlad Mamzer. Okay, so that, excuse me, is when you guys, that's if you, that's up to 6, 5, 5, 4, 4, 3. In other words, all the places before Benanas said an Eved's acceptable, Rabbi Kiva said not. So if Benanas, if you marry with such a get, right, it would be, you'd be okay. Rabbi Kiva says if you have child from the second marriage, you'll be a mamzer because you're never divorced. That's up to 3-2. That's up to 3-2. Aval koshav shloisha, if you have three folds, the aid of shnayim, and you have two aidim, and you're missing one, even Ben Nanas would go ahead and say you need a karev. And why would a karev be acceptable? Because it's the Rabbanim. Rabbi Yossi Masni, right? Rabbi Yossi Masni kasha. Rabbi Yossi, he learned you can't have a karev there. You have to have a kasha there. I have a Tanya karev. Amra Papa Tani kasha. Learn kasha. In other words, no one. This would answer the question. We're going to equate a get of 3 makusha to a regular get of 2. So just like a get of 2, you need 2 ksherim. So to even a get of 3 by get makerech, you would need 3. Amra Yochanan lehuchshu boy ela 8 echad karev bavad. Guys, let's say the 6, 7. You have a bunch of folds. How many kroivim could you sign? 1. In other words, we'll accept kroivim, but only 1. Amra Yochanan lehuchshu boy ela 8 echad karev bavad. Aval trei loy. Dilma asi likiyumi betray kroivim. The chad kasha. Maybe you're going to go ahead and say, right? Guys, this get kireach, you need 3, correct? So if you're going to go ahead and say, I never gave the get, and you want to be mekayim b'chaysamav, you want to go ahead and authenticate the get, if you would allow 2 kroivim to sign and 1 non-karev, and you need 3, you'll say we're going to authenticate the get with what? With 3. Mashenkin, if one of them is a karev, you don't have to worry about it, as we'll see now in the Gemara. Okay? Amra Vashi, Masnisa Nami Deka, the Masnisa is also Meduyik, don't want that only 1 relative and not 2. Why? The Komedalge, because the Komedalge B'tani Chad. When the said the Machlokes Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva, right? How did they say? They said that 7, 6, 6, 5, 5, 4. That's what they said. Look at Rashi. The Kamadalik B'tani Chad. We only subtracted the difference between the folds and the 8 in ones. The whole diluvik dilug. So from 7 to 6, 6 to 5, 5 to 4, right? Shemana Mishlosin that you counted like dilug. El Echad b'minyan haksharim. Shmamina. What do you see from here? Hi karev. So shmamina. Rabbi is shmamina. How do you see the shmamina over here? That you're basically saying, right? If who's going to sign, fellas? Fellas, you have 7, 6. Who can sign on that one spot? Everyone said a karev, correct? Guys, look at me. I have 7 folds. I have 6 Adim. Ben Nanas and Rabbi Kiva would both be Maida. Who can sign on the latter fold? A karev. Why did you learn that? Because you don't have to worry about authenticating it with 2 kroivim. because you're only going to have one karev. The fact that you're leaving one spot and saying a karev could sign in that spot is meduyik that no other place was there a karev. Because if there was, you'd have to worry about two krayvim and one person. If I only have one karev, there's nothing to worry about. If I have two krayvim, there's something to worry about. When both Beis Shammai, both Rabbi Akiva and Ben Nanas agree on the missing fold, you're able to sign a karev. It must be because I don't have to worry about authenticating with two krayvim. You know why? Because there wasn't any other karev beforehand. That's the raya. That's the, you got that? Okay. Says let's just see the lashon again. The komedalgi b'tani chad chad. You skipped 7654. Shma mina, when the karev signs in that spot, is a raya that there's no other karev in any other spot. Amar by Shma mina. Hi karev chasim. Iboy discuss he can sign bein betchila, bein beemtza, bein besayf. He can sign the first, the middle, or the end. Mimai midaloi kavalei makom. When we weren't kaveh a spot for him, we weren't kaveh a spot for him. We just said he can sign. So we hear from here. Any three you can go ahead and fulfill, and you don't need an order. These you need order. Right? Look at Rashi. Says Rashi. Shmamina, third line down. High karev chasim bein betchila kaidel ksherim, whether before the kosher, bein be'emsai in the middle, bein b'saifai. How do you know that? Midaloi kavalei makai. They weren't kaveh a spot for him to sign in the Mishnah. Ushmamina midaloi kavalei makam. And now, why do we hear the fact they weren't kaveh a makam? The chol gitin shtaris mekusharim, any get in shtar that was sown, hayotze bebezdin leheir al chasimas eidem lekaimai. Mikol tilsa sade. You can go any three. Chasimabe, Shiakiru, Ashuk, Adim the Shuk recognize their signatures. They can go ahead and they Esachas Mehem, Mikaim and Lolagita, they can kaim the get. Bafil Him Fusarim, even if they're not together. Kigain, and Yeshbod Yud Adim. The Adi Ashuk Makirim Esaksav, Rishain Shlishi V'chamisha. You have 10 Adim, but the Adim recognize 1, 3, and 5. V'leibin Shiakiru Esachshlash Ritzufim, you do not need Ritzufim. Because Isak Raidach Bein Ritzufim, Amayla Hukshu by Ella Hashlomis Karev Echad. And we should Dilma Asa the Kiyume B'Shnei Kroivim B'Chad Kachik Naminal El Likvalei Makan. Okay, so now outside. The fact that he can sign any place, tells us that what? That you do not need, you don't need, you weren't Kaveh Makan because we're not worried about him. Because if Aiden come from the Shuk, they recognize the signatures, and they don't have to recognize them necessarily in a row. Even if it's 10 signatures, it's 1, 3, and 5. It's okay. Again, because if you are Kaveya Makaim, if you're Kaveya Makaim, then you can go ahead and very easily go ahead and go anywhere. You would need Ritzufim, because maybe by Kaveya Makaim, but if you be Kaveya Makaim, you could use Ritzufim. By not being Kamakam, you don't need Ritzufim. I think that's what it's saying. Let me see one more time. These saklai the meaning of Ritzufim, says Rashi, why? If you don't need, why isn't it kosher? El Hashlamis Karev Echad, sign 1. So once you Kaveya Makaim, then you can go 3 in a row, and you can even have 2 or 3. Guys, watch this. I have 10 people sign on. I have 9. It's 7. It's a 7 and a 6, right? I'm Kaveya Makom, so the Kroiv I'm going to sign in the 1 and 2 spots. Then you can go ahead and be Mekayim and get 3, 4, and 5 spots. You see from here the fact that you don't need Ritzufim, that you would have to worry about what? Having 2 Eidim to Mekayim to get. Let's see it inside. Any 3, 1, 3, 5. V'loi b'yinim Ritzufim 1, 2, 3. These sakadai b'yinim Ritzufim likv'lei makoim lahai karev b'tchila by be'emsai b'saif. Put the karev in a designated spot. Or kasha be'tuva, and then you can be kasha 3 in a row, or whatever it is. Ki yasi l'kamei dervami amalei say v'hishtam alav eved min hashuk. He said, I agree with Ben Nanis. You don't need a karev. It even would be acceptable an eved min hashuk. I thank everyone for listening. Bez Hashem, we'll get back to you tomorrow morning.